Why should we have an allotment? Yes, in a modern day world we have limitless access to our favorite foods. We have made ourselves super busy with work and leisure activities, so we don't have time to waste going to the allotment to grow our food that takes ages to produce, which isn't any cheaper than the food we buy in the supermarket anyway. However, having an allotment makes you think about the foods you like to eat because it takes time to grow. It teaches you about seasons and about planning, and it's incredibly therapeutic. And it gives you an opportunity to take a step back from your busy day and enjoy something that takes time. There's no quickness to it. It takes time. It'll grow as fast as it grows. So it slows down life to a much more even keel pace. We as humans think we're at the top of the food chain, and to some degree we are. However, we are only 1% human, and the rest of us is different microbes living in our body, helping us to remain fit and healthy. Over the last decade, irresponsible farming and tilling has caused destruction to the soil and the soil microbiome. The use of fertilizers and pesticides have contaminated our food, which threatens us and the planet. We need more people to grow their own food without using pesticides or tilling, as it would make a huge change to the environment. If you look at how we live and act, it's very much like a parasite. We bury our heads in the sand thinking that we're doing our bit for the environment because we use a reusable bag at the supermarket, or we put our recycling out every 2 weeks. Taking ownership and growing as much of your own food as you possibly can is incredibly rewarding. I have been growing now for 3 years on my allotment, and I'm nowhere near self-sufficient. However, I do grow an incredible diverse amount of healthy, nutritious, uncontaminated food. I make my own compost and chicken manure to enrich the soil. I follow no dig practices to not break and damage the soil and to naturally bring up the soil's microbiome. I bring the green waste from mine and my neighbours' lawn cuttings and the kitchen scraps to the chickens to scratch through before it becomes lovely rich compost. I have a wildlife pond that is home to frogs and newts and collects all the rainwater from the surrounding area, which I use to irrigate the polytunnel. And all the water that is not absorbed by the soil and the plants returns back to the pond. I rescued some chickens from a farm prior to them being destroyed, and since starting looking after them, they have never stopped laying tasty eggs. This is now their 2nd year of extra life, and they became parents this year when we hatched some of the eggs. And for me, this is the most important aspect of becoming your own grower, is working with nature and trying to build an ecosystem that sustainably can provide me and my family with food. Now, it won't necessarily always provide us with every bit of food that we need, and there's going to be times when things don't work. But the idea is using and working with nature to feed your family with the best quality food you can possibly supply them. The allotment is 250 square meters. The polytunnel takes up a quarter, and the chicken run takes up another quarter. These are my primary spaces, and the areas that are mostly responsible for the majority of the food I've created to date. The other half of the plot is slowly being cultivated, and it has raised beds, some larger beds, some vertical growing areas, and eventually that'll be where I grow my bigger, more substantial crops like potatoes, garlic, my outside corn, my bigger plants like my pumpkins and my courgettes, fruit trees, some perennial plants that return like asparagus. And the idea is to create a growing environment that doesn't require as much work as a traditional growing area. The polytunnel will always be quick turnaround crops and longer, warmer loving crops. The chicken run will be responsible for eventually producing eggs and meat for the family. In the outside area, the idea is if I can grow plants that don't require constant attention, I'll still have time to live, the busy modern life. And that's what the objective of this whole allotment project is how much food can I grow for my family while still remaining in the modern day living lifestyle. The polytunnel will house a 12,000 litre aquaponics tank sunk into the ground. it will eventually have tilapia, which will be a source of protein for our family, which these fish will be fed from duckweed and other vegetation that will be grown in a separate pond. The area above the tank will have vertical grow troughs that will produce all the salad leaf crops that we need. There will be solar power requirement to this project, as we'll need to aerate the tank and pump the water up to the grow beds. There will be a media bev above the tank too, which will be used to grow squash and watermelons. The rest of the polytunnel will be for warmth-loving crops like tomatoes, aubergines, cucumbers in the main bed, and with the smaller beds down the side for more salad crops and the root vegetables like beetroots, turnips, and carrots. The idea with the polytunnel is we can increase our growing cycles. So, where traditionally plants would be, summer crops, we can get an extra 2 months either side. So we can increase our growing time. And I've had crops grow throughout the entire winter in the polytunnel for basic greens. So the polytunnel is a key part of the whole allotment project. A lot hinges on the polytunnel. The polytunnel size is a 36 foot long by 18 foot. And for the other half of the allotment, the plan is to grow our staples on that area. So garlic, onions, potatoes, strawberries, raspberries, squashes, pumpkins, courgettes, as well as fruit trees. And eventually we'll get another smaller run for a few geese and a few ducks, just to add a variety to our diet. We also have a little area where we plan to put a 10 by 10 shed, which will be insulated and also need a power source, as we would like to grow some mushrooms in the area, so oyster mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms, and some more medicinal mushrooms like lion's mane, etc., to really increase our family's nutrient intake in this very small space. So the objective for the outside area is to create a very easy to manage area. So we'll be growing from raised beds. We'll have some open fields for the more complex crops like potatoes, corn, courgettes, squash, garlic and onions that won't require as much weeding to root out, to keep up with the area. And then perennial plants. So we're going to look at growing a lot more perennial plants, plants that come up, every 1 year or 2 years, some longer standing, and maybe more like a forestry type growth, artichokes and, wild garlic, etc. Things that come back every year. So in conclusion, there is still a lot of work to do to get all the infrastructure in the ground to be good enough quality to grow the amount of food we plan to grow. Luckily for me, till then, I get the experience and the correct formula to make it a success. I can just go and buy the missing food groups from the local grocery store. It is a really exciting and ambitious goal that I have and that I hope to achieve. And at the moment in time and resources, they keep the project from progressing at the pace I would like to. However, I started 3 years ago, and the changes that I've made over 3 years with the time that I have been vast. And it's gone from a space that grew nothing to a space that produces, anywhere between 50 and 100% of our food during the summer, and 10 to 5% of our food during the winter. So as a project, it's a long-term project. There's loads still to learn. There's loads of infrastructure that has to be built and to be created, and there's money to be spent on this project as the time goes by. So again, back to the conclusion of why everybody should have an allotment, and it's quite simple. Everybody should be thinking about the quality of food that they eat. There's the age-old saying is, you are what you eat, and the objective is, if we put good quality food into our body, we can live longer and we have more time to do the things we want to do. By growing your own food and tending to your land, you're using your body and your physical, especially most of us who, sit behind a desk all day and don't get an opportunity to exercise properly. And it's a great way to go and exercise. It's a great way of teaching our children where their food comes from. It's a great way to get them involved in the whole cycle of life and teach them that there's more to life than just going to the refrigerator and getting whatever they want out there and then sitting in front of the Xbox. All around, An allotment is a great thing for a family. You create your own food, you can plan your resources, you plan together, you grow the things that you like as a family, and then there's the whole other step of preserving the food you grow. You know, bottling your tomatoes into, you know, pasta sauces for the year, for the winter, and preserving your fruit in jams and jellies, or even making alcohol from your fruit. It's an all-encompassing hobby that is great for the body, and it's a key part of the cloudbird experiment. So my objective throughout all the videos is self-development, self-improvement, improving the life of myself, improving the life of my family, and improving the life of people around us. And I think it's really important to take a moment and just think what we do day to day and how we could be better. And that is everything that the cloudbird experiment is about. So I hope you enjoyed this episode.